Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Bangum Langayate Girim Yatkripa Tamahang Bande Shri Gurun Dinataram Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Ancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhobhya Evacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. So we're picking up the 11th chapter of the Bhagavatam's 11th canto. The part of the Bhagavatam often referred to as Uddhava Gita. Why is it called Uddhava Gita? Govinda now?
Because Krishna is talking to Uddhava.
Because Krishna is talking to Uddhava. Just as in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is instructing Arjuna. So here Krishna is instructing Uddhava, also his friend, very close friend. So the other night we heard from the Lord how we're starting, he's discussing the differences between those who are liberated and those who are conditioned. And essentially what that means is conditioned. What does conditioned mean, Mayapur?
Condition means that you're covered by the gunas.
What's a guna?
A rope. The modes of
A rope? You're covered by ropes. The gunas are qualities, different qualities or modes under which we work under the direction of the material nature. So conditioned means you're conditioned by the material nature. And that means, as we've seen, essentially, that you misidentify with matter. That's our problem. We misidentify with matter. That's what it means to be conditioned. Otherwise, there's no, as we pointed out before, I'm not going to let this one go. There's really no question of conditioning or liberation. Because these things only have meaning in the material world. These things only have meaning. They have no significance whatsoever when we consider that we're actually consciousness. Any more than day or night have any meaning from the sun's perspective. That's what Brahma says. When you're the sun, what's the question of day or night? What's that mean? Day, night. If you're the sun, it's always noon, right? But there isn't any. And just as Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, he says, Krishna Surya Sama, Maya Hoyandakar. Krishna Sama Surya. Krishna is like the sun. Maya Hoyandakar. And Maya, Andhakar, darkness. Anta means darkness, blindness. And Andhakar means that which makes you blind, that's darkness. Krishna Surya Sama, Maya Hoyandakar. Krishna Taham Jannahi Mayatika. Mayatika. Krishna is like the sun, and Maya is like the darkness. Where there's Krishna, where there's the sun, there's no darkness. But where there's Krishna, there's no illusion. So if we're in our, it's a problematic word, original situation as Krishna consciousness, original as in that's our essential nature, what we're intended for, then there's no question of darkness. So liberation and conditioning are only considerations for those of us who are stuck under the influence of the three modes of material nature. Because in our situation, we think we're doing things. We think we're doing all kinds of things, but it's really just the modes, as we saw in the last verse we read. It says, a learned person who's seen the futility of material desires, this is one of my favorite points, especially from the 11th Canto. This doesn't mean anything to anybody who doesn't have some sense of the futility of material endeavor. Not everybody needs a guru. What's the point of having a guru if you have strong faith in the material world? If you think you've got something to get out of the material world, what kind of guru are you going to get? Tony Robbins? You know, milk all you can out of the material world. He'll show you how to do it. Oh, and you'll pay handily for the advice. He's showing you how to do it. Find suckers and line them up. And that's not necessarily to denigrate the effectiveness of any of his advice. It may be there must be some effect. Otherwise, you wouldn't, 25, 30 years later, you still wouldn't have people paying hand over fist to go to some Tony Robbins weekend seminar. You know, they buy plane tickets, hotel rooms, they pay exorbitant conference fees to go and hear Tony Robbins stand up on the stage, walk pace back and forth across the stage with his, whatever he is, 6'8" or something of business, and let them know how wonderful they are. I mean, if it didn't do something, I don't know how many suckers are born every minute. Ask P.T. Barnum. Mm-hmm. But if we have some sense that we can really gain something by trying to exploit the resources of material nature, we don't need a group, a subgroup. Music guru, cool. Business guru, okay. Self-help guru, whatever. These aren't gurus in the real sense. As we saw earlier in the 11th Canto, the person who needs a guru is someone who understands the utter futility of all material endeavor. Because whatever you do, it's gone in a flash. Now, you may think, I may build an empire that will last, maybe a couple, 3 generations. That could be a Rockefeller or whoever else has built businesses that last a really long time, or some banker like a Rothschild or something like that. But how long is that going to last? The Roman Empire is supposed to last, 1,000 years. The Third Reich was supposed to last 1,000 years. What did it last? 15 years, not even that. And we have, Americans have a sense that the American nation will go on forever. And how long have we been here? 240 years as a nation? 239 years? 239 years? I don't know, because I have a kid who was born in 1976, the bicentennial year, and she's 39. So, our country's been here a little over 200 years, and we have a sense that it'll not only exist forever, but dominate forever. But the thing is, all these things go, just as in Shelley's poem Ozymandias. Didn't think to bring that. But this is a poem I sometimes share from one of the English Romantic poets, Percy Bysshe Shelley. And he, in this poem, he tells the story of a man who went to an exotic desert land, and he found this broken up statue, these feet, and then pieces lying around, and there's the statue's head lying half buried in the sand, and the inscription at the bottom. Ozymandias is a Greek name for Ramses II, one of the great Egyptian emperors, who did have a very large and powerful empire for a while. So at the inscription on the base of the, underneath the feet, on the base of the statue says, "My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair." Because he built this huge empire with huge palaces and temples and all kinds of things. And he expected it to last forever. "Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair." You'll never be able to pull off something like this. You'll never be able to compete with me. And it's dust and rubble. So this is a situation, it's what we're essentially, everything that we're doing, we're building sand castles. And if we don't know that, we don't need a guru. If we don't at least have a sense that and all our endeavors are destined to, crumble into dust, no matter what it is, then we don't need a guru. So the sage, I think it's Hovey, says earlier, after explaining the utter futility of all material endeavor, he says, "Tasmat guru patyeta jigyasya shabde parejnishnatam kamanyupashamasham." Having seen that, having seen the utter futility of all material endeavor, then you should take shelter of a guru. Tasmat, therefore, guru prapadyeta. Take shelter of a guru, take complete shelter of a Sadguru. And he tells the qualifications. Shabde parejnishnatam kamanyupashamasham. And he's fixed in the absolute truth. He's learned in the scriptures, and he's been immersed in spiritual existence. So then Krishna says to Uddhava, "Daivadhine shariresmin gunabhavena karmana vartamana buddhastatra kartasmiti nibadhyate." Under the control of his previous deeds, a foolish person accepts a material body and proudly considers himself the doer of all his activities. Thus, he becomes entangled in all kinds of bodily affairs as the reactions to his fruit of activities that are actually carried out by the three modes of material nature. He's doing these things. He thinks he's doing these things. Each of us is convinced that we are the doer. Ahamkara. I'm doing it. I made this. Well, because there was some TV show on the Family Times. Huh? Michael J. Fox. And I think the production company, I can't remember what it was called, but their little thing at the end, that had, I don't know, it was a dog or something like that, and the little kid's voice saying, "I made this. Ahamkar. I did it." And that's our disease, ahamkar. I did it. We think I'm doing this. But it's really just our senses interacting with their objects under the control of the moods. of material nature. Goodness, passion, and ignorance. Enlightenment, desire, and influence. These things move us, like in that picture in Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita as it is. You know, we're being moved. You know, you got the three different modes: the yellow, goodness in the yellow sari, and passion in the red sari, and ignorance in the blue sari or purple sari or something like that. And they're pulling the strings like a marionette. And so this is just the same kind of thing that Krishna describes in the third chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where he says, Prakriti kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvashaha ahankara vimudhatma pratam. The spirit soul, bewildered by the influence of false ego, thinks himself the doer of activities that are actually carried out by the three modes of material nature. So what I've been kind of pointing out is connections. When we read Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, easy in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita because they're the verses, the text itself cites so many verses from Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita and so many scriptures. But when we read the Bhagavatam, when we read the Gita, we should also be looking for connections. Sometimes they're pointed out in the commentaries of our teachers, and sometimes we remember them because we've been reading elsewhere. Because that's what we do. Shravanam Kirtanam. Shravanam Mapanam. The Shravanam Kirtanam is always there. So this is pretty much the same thing. What Krishna tells Uddhava here in the 11th chapter of the Uddhava Gita, well, not the 11th chapter of the Uddhava Gita, but 11th chapter of the 11th Canto. Same thing that he tells Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita. We think we're doing these things. And what makes us think? We're just simply bewildered by our identification with matter. We have nothing to do with matter.
So I'm not making Kiwix.
We're talking about the conditioned souls here. You're in a liberated position right now. Look at you. First of all, taking shelter of a spiritual master, Sadguru. Well, a couple of them. And you're right here in Gaurata Madhava's room, in their salon, where we're talking about that. And you're engaging your senses. That's what we were discussing the other night, right? What does it mean to be liberated? You know, from Bhakti Rasamrita to Sindhu, Srila Rupa Goswami says, it means engaging you use your senses, your senses, your mind, and your speech in the service of the Lord. That's what it means to be liberated. What it means to be conditioned is you use your senses, your mind, and your speech in trying to manipulate the material world, try to exploit the resources of material nature. So, no, not at all. And then Krishna says to Uddhava, Evam virakta shayana asanatana madhyame darshana sparshana grhana bhojana shravanadishu natate badhyate vidvan tatradayan gunan. Learned persons who are fixed in detachment engage their senses in activities such as sleeping, sitting, traveling, bathing, seeing, touching, smelling, and hearing, but they never become entangled. By simply remaining as a witness, they do not become entangled like ordinary, foolish people. So remember that, witness? We had two birds, two similar birds living in the tree. One is Krishna, one is me. I'm always in distress trying to find happiness, but he is waiting day by day for me to turn and look his way. So now, once we understand that our real position is not going nuts after every berry, every piece of fruit on the tree, or berry on the bush, or whatever then we become more like the witness. We don't identify with the tree and the fruits. We identify more with that witness, and we behave like a witness. So, does that mean we don't do any work? Krishna says, that's not what it means to be detached. It's not what it means to be a sannyasi. You don't do any work, you don't light sacrificial fire, or any of those things. The liberated soul also sleeps, eats, bathes, works, plays, loves, as they have families. They do, essentially, all the same kinds of things that everyone else does. How do you tell them apart? The motivation. Why they're doing it. And how they respond. We'll see that as well. So, now, this verse, now remember our situations, the Bhagavad Gita situation and the Uddhava Gita situation where we are right now, quite similar. Early, in the second chapter, Krishna asks Arjuna, how do we know if somebody's liberated? How do they eat? How do they walk? How do they talk? And Uddhava has asked Krishna the same thing here. How do we know who's liberated? How can we tell? So Krishna is giving answers that are not at all dissimilar. So if we okay, oops. Oh. If we take a look at chapter 5 in Bhagavad Gita, if we could take a look at chapter 5, find something rather similar. Someday someone will develop e-reader technology so that you can virtually grab 8 or 15 or 20 pages at once. So Krishna says in text 8 and 9, he says, Naiva kinchit karomi iti yukto manyeta tattvarit Pashyan shunvan spashan jigran ashnan gachan swapan shwasan Rajalpan vishwajan ghanan unmishan mishan napi Indriyan indriyarteshu vartanta iti dharayan. It's indriyana indriyarteshu, just like the verse we read yesterday. This is a person in divine consciousness, although engaged in seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, moving about, sleeping, and breathing, always knows within himself that he actually does nothing at all. Because while speaking, evacuating, receiving, or opening or closing his eyes, he always knows that it's only the material senses that are engaged with their objects. He or she is aloof from them. It's just the senses interacting with their objects under the directions of the modes of material nature that influence a particular person's subtle body, based on impressions from based on impressions gained through the activities performed in previous lifetimes. That's all it is. We think it's me. We think, oh, I want to watch Mad Men. But no, there's some advertising been on. We've seen some advertising. You'll have a lot of fun if on Sunday night you spend an hour at HBO or wherever it is and you watch this particular program. And if we're under the influence of the kinds of modes, material nature, then we might respond by saying, yeah, let me watch Don somebody or other. What's his name? Or someone, someone with a different propensity, someone with some different impressions, might prefer Game of Thrones. So we're thinking these are our things. Some people, all they want to do is play basketball. And some people under the influence of who have different impressions from previous lifetimes, they'd rather go surfing. A bad day surfing is better than a good day at work. So there's so many varieties of desires because there's so many ways in which the different modes of material nature and all their different permutations, all the different divisions might combine. But if we actually understand things as they are, then we're not going to be bewildered by these things. And then he says, I'm just not such a little person. Then he says, Evam Virakti Shayana. Oh, I read that one. Prakritisto Vyasamsakto Yatakam Savitaniva Vaisharadhyekshaya Sangha Chitaya Chinna Samshaya Pratibuddha Evasvatnam Anatva Vinivartante. Although everything rests in space, it doesn't mix with anything. The sun is not affected by the water in which its reflection appears, and the wind that blows everywhere is not affected by the aromas it carries. I kind of foreshadowed this verse the other night. Similarly, a self-realized soul is detached from the material body and the world he lives in. He's like someone who's awakened from a dream. With the sword of knowledge sharpened by detachment, the self-realized soul cuts to pieces all doubts, born of misidentification with matter, and thus withdraws his mind from the temporary displays of Maya. So there are a couple of things here. Again, kind of analogizing our situation with the dream. He's not saying, we're snoozing under a kalpavriksha in Vrindavan, having forgotten we're cowherd boys and deciding that we prefer to be worms in stool. But he's saying that what we're engaged in now has no more substance than what happens in a dream. When we have a dream, all kinds of things might happen. Things that are improbable. Sometimes they're really cool. Sometimes they're awful or terrifying. Sometimes there's people praising you. And sometimes people vilifying you, insulting you, doing all kinds of things to you, abusing you in so many ways. And it's horrible or ruby, depending on the nature of the dream. While you're dreaming, but as soon as we wake up, there might be a moment of apprehension, but almost immediately you realize, oh, it was a dream. And as someone mentioned in a Facebook update the other day, which I just really liked, says, do you care at all about what people say about you in a dream? When you've awakened from the dream? Who cares? It doesn't have anything it doesn't touch you any more than what's reflected in a mirror in a body of water touches the sun. Or the aromas that the wind carries touch it, or that the things in this room actually touch space, akasha. They don't affect it at all. So if we understand that we're consciousness, that we're not matter, if we don't misidentify, because that's the whole thing, all the doubts that we entertain, all the anxiety comes from misidentifying with matter. It's really that simple. Not easy to, I mean, we can kind of grasp it. We've heard it, 108,000 times or 108 million times, however, depending on how long we've been around. But sometimes it takes a while for things to penetrate, just like, even though when I first started going to Bhagavad Gita classes a very long time ago, I thought I was getting a grasp of Bhagavad, starting to get a little bit of a grasp of Bhagavad Gita, and I very much wanted to. But when it came right down to it, when push came to shove, I was somebody whose experience had made him a pacifist. And I was studying a book spoken on the battlefield in which God exhorts a devotee to fight. And I was having a hard time wrapping my head around that. So it was 3 Bhagavad Gita classes in a row when I asked the same question: how is this being spoken on the battlefield? And the answer was given 3 times in a row. Not 3 nights in a row. We had classes Monday, Wednesday, and Friday back then. And I understood it intellectually the first time. I understood it intellectually the second time. But when I came back the next time, I still had this thing eating at me. I'm still like, what do I do about this? The third time it started to sink in. I was able to actually begin to assimilate. And that's what we want to do. We want to try to assimilate what we get in these classes. They should be engaging enough. And our interest should be great enough that we think about it afterwards. It's like when you go to a class, you take notes, and what do? You put the notes away and you don't think about them until the midterm or the final. No, we teach you. You go back over those notes again. Maybe you rewrite them, or you go through within 24 hours, because there's this curve that drops, kind of drops off, and then after 24 hours it gets very steep. But if within those 24 hours you go back and redo those notes or whatever, fill in the blanks and stuff like that. If you go through, sometimes you'll remember the things that you missed that the professor said while you were writing something else. And you can fill that in. Or if you rewrite the notes, you can, and you're able to assimilate it. Just like, Grandma tells you, chew each mouthful at least 30 times. What she wants you to do is to assimilate. So, kind of inhale it like bird. Over the years over. These are the things we fuss about to sleep. These are the things we're thinking about when we wake up in the morning. And when we read Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, we're finding echoes and resonances with the things we heard last night or last week or yesterday morning. So, Sri Maharaj says we are all students forever. And this verse can also take us back to that banyan tree, at the beginning of the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. So let's take a quick look at that again, because we've been told that we need to take care of all these different attachments with the weapon of knowledge. So Krishna says, Urdhva Moolamada Andha Shakam, downwards, is Ashvatam Praharavyayam Chandansi Yasya Parnani, Yastam Veda Savedavit. It's said that there's an imperishable banyan tree that has its roots upwards and its branches down, and whose leaves are the Vedic hymns. One who knows this tree is the knower of the Vedas. He describes it a little further. Andaschardvam prashvatastasya sakha punapravridha vishaya pravalaha adhaschamulanyanu karmanubandhini manushya-loke. Branches of this tree extend downward and upward, nourished by the three modes of material nature. Banyan tree gets its nourishment both from the ground and the air. The twigs are the objects of the senses. The tree also has roots going down. These are bound to the fruit of activities of human society. Narupamasyeha tatopalamate nanto nachadir nachasampatishta ashvattamenam suvirudhamulam asangashastrena dritena chitva tatapadam tat parimargitavyam yasmin gatana nivartanti bhuyaha not nivartanti. Remember that. Tameva chadyam purusham prapadye yatapravrta prasvita purani. This is the real form of this tree, cannot be perceived in this world. No one can understand where it ends, where it begins, or where its foundation ends, or where its foundation is. You get some places, you get banyan trees that are just enormous. One tree, like a forest, because you could have the roots coming down from the branches to the ground. So they hang down for a while and they keep growing, and then this thing just kind of spreads. And it's like a jungle, and you can get lost in it, and you don't know where the original tree is anymore. How do you know? I mean, if you got a tree that covers half an acre, how do you know where the original tree is? And you can actually get lost in it. But, he says, with determination one must cut down this strongly rooted tree with the weapon of detachment. Weapon of detachment. Notice the connections. Thereafter one must seek that place from which, having gone, one never returns. Not nivartante. There are two places in this chapter, early in this chapter, where Krishna says, he describes the spiritual world as that place from which no one returns. A few verses later, he says the same thing. And there surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, from whom everything began, and from whom everything is extended since beyond time. So, how can we become detached? If we just understand that we have to hear it and we have to practice. But if we understand that we don't have anything more to do with the objects of the senses than the air does with the aromas that it carries. It's not changed. It's not affected. The wind's not affected by whether it passes over a dump or it passes over a plumeria orchard. It's not changed. It's not affected. It's not freaked out. It's not thinking, oh, I'm such a wonderful wind. I'm passing over. Or it doesn't get all down in the dumps and think, oh, I'm such a crappy wind. I'm blowing over a dump. And he said, don't blink. He doesn't think that. He doesn't get all freaked out by it. These dualities don't have any more meaning than night and day from, finish it for me,
The sun.
the sun's perspective.
It's always new. And
It's all just made up stuff. And then he says, Yasya sturavita samkalpa pranindriya manodhiyam vrittaya sa vinirmukto dehasto pi hitatguna. A person is known to be actually liberated from the gross and subtle material bodies when all the functions of his body and mind are performed without material desires. So Krishna's kind of saying the same thing over again, repeatedly, over and over again. How redundant can you get? Repeatedly over and over again, right? But that's what Krishna's doing. There's a theme here, there's a motif. It's not you. It's the senses interacting with their objects under the influence of the mode's material nature. And what entangles you in it is you're mistaking yourself for matter. Misidentified yourself with matter. He says, although possessing a material body, such a person is not in bondage. He's vinirmukta, completely liberated. And then he says, Yasyat mahingsayate hingsraya yena kinchiri prachaya archite va kvachit tattva navyatik priyate buddha. Sometimes one may be tormented by a miscreant, or attacked by a ferocious animal, and at other times one may be shown all respect and worshipped. One who does not become angry when attacked or satisfied when he's worshipped is certainly most intelligent. And then in his commentary, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur kind of emphasizes a lot of his Bhagavatam commentaries are really restatements of the substance of the verse in simpler Sanskrit prose. So here he says, if one doesn't become angry when attacked for no apparent reason, and doesn't become enlivened when glorified or worshipped, then you know he's self-realized. And he can be considered to be fixed in spiritual intelligence. That's what this verse is saying. If you don't get hacked off, if people don't show you the respect you think you're due, or your head's not turned by some praise that somebody offers. In other words, you don't buy into your own ad campaign. That's liberated. Because these things they don't have any more meaning than what people say about you in a dream. They don't have any more meaning than night and day does from the perspective of the sun. So he's just, he's actually, there's a drumbeat here. And then tonight's last verse, he says, Nastuvita nanindeta kurvata sadva asadhuva vadato guna doshabhyam varjita sama drinmuni. Here's what it means to be a muni, a saintly person, a really learned person. He sees everyone with equal vision. Sees everyone as the same as me. Just as Chanakya Pandit says in one of his maxims that Srila Prabhupada cited several times. Matrivat paradareshu paradravyani lokshtava. Matrivat paradareshu. Paradareshu. Women, others women, others wives. In other words, anyone who's not your wife. How should you see them? Matrivat. As situated in motherhood. That's your mother. So, anyone's, in other words, they're not there for you to enjoy. They're not there for you to exploit. They're not, you shouldn't identify with them. And paradravyani loshtava. Paradravyani. Para, somebody else's dravya, stuff. Right? Others' things, others' possessions. How do you see them? Loshtava. garbageness, rubbishness. If you see, if you see half a sandwich discarded in the gutter, are you going to be thinking, "Gotta have that"? There are people, unfortunate enough, that when they see a cigarette butt on the ground, they may think, "Oh, whoa, wait, there's almost like half an inch on that butt." But intelligent people don't think that. If you see things as you are, you're thinking, well, first of all, it's tobacco, it's a noxious weed. Yeah, it's got some medicinal properties, but not the way it's been processed with. God doesn't even know how many chemicals probably that's what it was processed with. And then somebody's had their, the end is just saturated with some of the nectar of someone's lips and all the stuff that goes with that. And it's been sitting there. So we don't identify with garbage in the street. So when we see somebody else's car, see somebody driving, a BMW 7 Series down the street, we don't think, "Oh, gotta have that car." When we see some attractive woman walking across campus, we don't think, "Oh, gotta have her." You have a job like mine, if you thought like that, your life is simply impossible. Because you got 35,000 people. It's just kind of a city, small city within a city. And most of them are young women, and a lot of those young women are very attractive. If you're running around thinking, gotta have. That's like this stupid bird in the tree. Gotta have, oh, wait. It's like the attention span routine. So E equals MC. Squirrel! That's the bird in the tree. So you don't identify with those women as something for you to enjoy. You don't identify with other people's things as something for you to enjoy. But what do you identify with? Atmavat sarvabhuteshu. And you see that just as your own. You identify with that. Therefore, Paradukhaduki Kripambuti. The devotee, someone who has this kind of vision, what's their real suffering? When they see other people suffer. And therefore they're Kripambuti, oceans of mercy. So it's a completely different vision. So he says, he sees everybody with equal vision, so he's not affected by what ordinary people consider to be good or bad. When you're from a certain group of people, you don't worry about what other people think. Let's say you're some upper middle. Say you're living among people like I was when I was a kid, upper middle class people in northern Virginia, suburban Washington. You have 4 or 5 bedroom houses and nice cars and stuff. You don't care what Snuffy Smith thinks is cool and what's not cool. Snuffy Smith, he was a comic character, funny papers, and he was a hillbilly moonshiner. The revenuers were always coming. He was always sitting out by his still. What's that old song? Get you a copper kettle, get you a copper coil, get you a bag of sour mash, and nevermore you'll toil. You just stay down by the junipers, something or other. Anyway, the pale moonlight. That's snuffy. So you got people living in the hills, in ramshackle houses, and their whole life is making moonshine or something like that. You don't care what they think is cool. You don't care what they're watching on TV. You have your own tastes. So in the liberated soul, the same way. He's not thinking, oh, everybody else likes such and such a thing, so I got to do it too. Although he certainly sees how others are performing beneficial or horrible works and speaking intelligently or foolishly, he doesn't wish to praise or criticize anyone. So this meme on Facebook this afternoon. Who you think your candidate is. And it was probably like Obi-Wan Kenobi or something like that. Or Yoda. I don't remember. I kind of half noticed it. I'm just kind of scrolling down, trying to see if there's anything actually interesting. Who do you think your candidate is? Who do you think their candidate is? Darth Vader? Who they both really are? Jar Jar Binks. So we're not impressed. They're speaking intelligently or foolishly. I had an acquaintance where I was living before in Florida, who for some reason, because I didn't share his disgust with ideas that he considered liberal political ideas, that he thought I must have been some kind of Obama acolyte. He used to yell from like across the temple grounds, "Jai Obama!" or something like that. And I said, "What are you talking about? I didn't even remember the last time I voted." Well, maybe I did. I do kind of remember the last time I voted. Probably voted in 2000, but it didn't really matter. I voted for Ralph Nader. It didn't matter if I voted who I voted for, because I was voting in California. California was going for the blue guy, not the red guy. So I could vote for whoever I wanted. Wasn't going to, elect anybody. So it took me a long time to convince him. And I said, listen, I couldn't have voted. If I had voted at all, I couldn't have voted for the guy. I read this New York Times piece showing the guy's just a politician. Sure, he gives great, gives speeches that sound all lofty and everything. Frankly, the guy hasn't given a good speech until last week, when he spoke at the Mother Emanuel Church in Charleston. Because his theme was God's grace. We all depend on God's grace. The only good speech I've heard that guy give. And I give him a good grade. Give him something above a C for that one. So generally, though, the liberated souls aren't going to be impressed by any of this stuff. It's all Srila Sridhar, even the Vedic stuff, Srila Sridhar Maharaj says. Except for the Bhagavatam, it's all a jungle of sound. It's all bewildering. It's all just like a big old banyan tree of noise. You do this, you do that. It's just like you walk through, say you walk through the picnic grounds at the beach or something like that, and everybody's got their different radios going. This radio is telling you to buy that radio is telling you to buy this radio is telling you to buy something else. They're all telling you something different. That's like going through the Vedas. You can have this, you can have that, you've got to do this ritual, that ritual, worship this god or that god or whatever. And everybody's bewildered by it. That's why Vyasadeva, when even after compiling the Vedas, organizing the Vedas and all the Puranas and everything like that, and the Mahabharata even, which is just for Kali Yuga people, because it took Dharma and presented it in the form of a big soap opera. Still, he wasn't satisfied, because it was just more kind of jungle of sounds. People are still bewildered when they read Mahabharata. What the real duty, what the real business, about what the real business of human life is. So Narvani castigated him. He says, well, of course you're depressed, because you've done all this wonderful work, but you still haven't put together, you still haven't given them something that exclusively glorifies direct devotional service to Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. is everything else just like pilgrimage for crows, like the dump. Pilgrimage for crows means the dump. That's where they go. So, so the answer to all this is Srimad Bhagavatam. So we want to hear the Bhagavatam, and we want to remember what we hear in the Bhagavatam, and we want to discuss with each other, remind each other what we hear in the Bhagavatam. In that way, the impressions in our heart, the impressions in our chitta become transformed. The heart becomes cleansed, and we get another sense of who we are. We realize consciousness, our nature is Satchidananda. And what that means is to cooperate with that Sandini Samvit Hladini world. That's where we're meant to live. That's the kind of company that we want, and will actually make us satisfied. I'll try to stop as my voice. Anybody have anything to add or any questions? Any questions there in the chat world? Is there anybody there? Not that many folks here, but about half of us here.
But it is being recorded.
Okay, thank you so much for your patience.
Ashrama Maharaj ki
Yeah, what is it? Excellent. Yeah.
It's a love attack.